listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are live from America and just outside the Matrix. It is time once again for the show that brings you the truth behind the headlines. I'm investigative journalist and part-time hobbyist video engineer, Lee Stranahan.
And I'm former CIA officer John Kiriakou.
And this is The Backstory. So, John, I've got all kinds of fanciness going on. Just, you see the video at all?
I have not been able to get on it yet. You know, I've been back on this show a year. I really should ask for a computer login. Saul keeps telling me to.
Yeah. Well, especially if Saul tells you to, then you definitely should. But I will say, I got a new piece of equipment in, and I'm capable of doing fantastic, neat stuff. And I've got, it's not even as neat like that. I just did a nice transition. You'll see. It's what we call a soft radial wipe.
A soft?
And it looks nice.
I see. That looks great.
And you see the screen behind me.
Yeah.
And I'm looking CNN-like, but we don't lie or molest children, unlike the people over at CNN who, you know, they do both.
Yes, unfortunately.
So, now, we've got a great show today. Again, second show of the year, and fourth to last show with John Kiriakou as the co-host over The Backstory.
Right.
He is moving down the aisle temporally. That was a little clumsy. But he's going to be on at an earlier time slot, along with Michelle Witte over Political Misfits, noon to 2 every day here on Radio Sputnik, 105.5 FM, AM 1390 in Washington, D.C. Now, I just got to ask, I'm not jealous. You're free to see other shows, or in this case, have a long-term relationship. But can Michelle say 105.5 FM, AM 1390 as quickly as I can?
No. She can't.
Right, okay.
Nobody can.
And I'm not comparing. Because there's a number of things Michelle can do better than I am. And this is going to sound racist, and it's not. Like baking. Now, the reason it's, first off, it sounds racist because it sounds like, well, she's a woman. What can she do?
Right.
But you know Michelle's a fantastic baker, right?
Yes, Michelle is an incredible baker. And, you know, it's funny, during the pandemic, so many people have sort of experimented, for example, with sourdough bread. She was making sourdough 5 years ago, and it's just killer. Excellent.
I don't like that we live in a society where if I say someone's a good baker, because that woman happens to have been born with ovaries, it may be perceived by some as sexist. Seriously, she's not only that, she's been a guest on. She, as you know, knows baking. Now, also, she knows geopolitics, right?
Yep. She's very intelligent.
Do you know what I still can't quite figure out? Is the Poppin' Fresh biscuits. You, like, rip the paper off first, and then I still can't quite figure that out. It's always a mess when I do it.
You know,
really is.
I found this recipe on Facebook where you take the Pillsbury pizza dough, you lay it out on a cookie sheet, you put a little bit of olive oil and just the faintest coating of tomato sauce. Then you load it with anything you would want to put in a stromboli. And then, then tons of mozzarella cheese, and then lay another Pillsbury pizza dough on top of it and pinch it so it's sealed. Bake it for 20 minutes at 350. Oh, my God. My kids go completely crazy over it. It's absolutely delicious.
I, as a middle-aged white guy, that sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Michelle would come in.
Yeah.
And she would make a crepe or quiche
and she would say, "Ugh, that's a single guy dinner." Yeah.
No, well, you know what? Guilty as charged.
Me too.
I'm just saying. There we go. We got a great show today. So for the first time this year, one of our favorite guests, straight out of Moscow, Mark Sloboda, will be joining us. And I've got an incredibly fancy graphic when Mark comes on, John.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
Don't you worry. Oh, don't you worry. When he comes on, what it is it's going to be able to have me and watch. I'll get it ready. I'm trying to get it ready. This should be it. There we go. See, it's me in a box, and then Mark Sloboda. Saul, you got that? Look at that.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty fancy.
I like that. That's
right?
good. That's sophisticated right there. That's good.
It is sophisticated, and I've barely gotten going. I've barely gotten going on this. Now, in the second, see, this is why I'm a single nerd, because this video stuff excites me to no end, John.
Yeah.
That's all I'll tell you. It really does. It thrills me in a way that's, you know, if I was 12 or 17,
right,
I'd get it more, but I'm not. Now, in the second hour, Kim Iverson is joining us. She's a lady. Should I ask her if she knows how to bake? Or is it, see, but that's just sexist, right?
No, I don't think so. My mom taught us to bake. And I actually still have all the recipes that my grandmother passed down on these little 3x5 cards.
What I should do to prove how woke I am is not ask Kim about it, but ask Mark Sloboda about his baking skills.
There you go.
You see, then
that's
I'm
a
defying.
Better idea. Yep.
I'm defying gender expectations then, which is what I do. And we're taking your calls, 202-521-1320. It's The Backstory. Now, the problem, John, is I've got all these doohickeys next to me. I've got like 2 or 3 screens. So it's, and I'm trying to get it so I do everything by feel. I'm like the Stevie Wonder of video engineers, where I just try to do it all by feel. And I'm pretty good at it, but it's new stuff and everything. But I'm happy. And Saul said, and I also got the audio interface in that I was talking about yesterday. Right. And so you're hearing, I can't hear me. How do I sound, John?
Oh, yeah, you sound great. You sound great. No problems
I don't know if
at
it
all.
sounds any, I don't know if it sounds any different. It should sound better. For the money I paid, it should sound better.
Honestly, it sounds like you're sitting here in the studio with me.
That sounds like something that might give you nightmares. Now, we got Mark Sloboda coming on in about 7 minutes because it's late in Moscow.
Yes.
And you know, he wants to deal with that. You know, one thing I found very interesting is that the stock market hit an all-time high. You saw that, right, the other day?
Yes.
Just like last Friday or Monday or something recently.
Right.
I don't play the stock market. But if Donald Trump had been president, he would have been blabbing about how well the stock market did. Correct? Am I right on that? And I heard, shall I say, nary a peep from Joe Biden about it. Yeah. Correct? Yeah. I mean, did you hear Biden out?
No. Nothing.
Talking about it?
Nothing.
Which, by the way, I think in this case, once again, I'm going to say Joe Biden, and I don't care, is ill-advised. He should have someone saying, look, go take credit for a record day on the stock market. And I don't think it matters that much. But you take the good news where you get it.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
God knows Donald Trump took credit for the stock market. There's no reason why Joe Biden shouldn't.
Constantly took credit for it.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is the stock market, I know this because I listened to the headlines, had taken a couple tumbles recently. But apparently the stock market, I'm seeing, we'll talk to Kim Iverson because she's been all over this COVID story for a while. And we'll talk to her about this stuff. I'm going to say once again, John, it seems to me like the media really wants to make the Omicron. When I listen to the headlines, I hear lots of scary stuff. And in places like Romania, for instance, they're about to do lockdowns. In Italy, they're about to do more serious, you know, they take it seriously. However, so A, it's not just a U.S. phenomenon, but B, I'm not seeing the numbers that would warrant in terms of deaths and hospitalizations. I'm seeing panic to get tests.
Yeah, right. Everybody wants tests.
Right. But you know what? Test, that's not anything to be panicked about.
No.
I'm just saying.
And actually, some places have tests. My sister lives in New Hampshire. I was there all week last week. And the state of New Hampshire sent tests to every resident of the state. And so she got 8 tests, 4 boxes with 2 tests in each one. She gave me 2 of the boxes.
Up here in South Dakota, I've seen no lines, no panic, nothing. In fact, although I'll tell you, a bus driver got testy with me yesterday. And I'm not joking. You know, I don't have to make this stuff up.
Yeah.
I was getting on the bus, and they have masks when you walk in the bus.
Uh-huh.
You get the mask, you put it on. And as I was going to get on the bus, he's like, sir, you don't have a mask on. I'm like, I'm going to get one. It's right there. He's like, you're supposed to have the mask on before you get on.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm like, but it's in the bus. It's over there. Jeez. And then I had my money out. I was all ready to pay. So my hands were full. Then I was trying to figure out what to do. And he was like, no, you got to put it on right now. It's like the guy was worried.
Yeah.
You know, just calm down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Calm down. Give a dude 15 seconds. I'll put the mask on. Let me put my money in the box to pay. Because if I don't have them, I'll say this again. I was a little worried the prices may have gone up. I pay up here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, John, $30 a month for an all-you-can-eat bus pass.
Wow. That is really, really good. You know, the local buses in Arlington are like that. When there's an emergency, like with COVID, they just made it all free. Anybody wants to ride the bus, you just get on the bus and go. But otherwise, I think it's $1 every time you get on. You pay $1. It's considerably less than what the Metro bus and Metro Rail cost.
It's $1.50 if you pay per ride. Or for $3, you get a day pass. Or for $30, you get the whole month.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, right. And so, but the problem is, if I don't have the bus pass when it's out, I've got to pay $1.50 to get downtown to buy the bus pass. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
I had to go through that. Oh, you know what we got going in Sioux Falls now? It's burger battle time, Sean.
Uh-oh.
No, it's good. It's not people throwing burgers at each other. 27 restaurants in downtown Sioux Falls are making their best burger, and you enter and rate them and everything else all throughout the month of January. So I like eating downtown anyway. It is, you know, I got to say, Sioux Falls is a nice place to live. And when we have exciting events like the burger battle, there's no real battle. Now, did you end up, I mentioned this yesterday, did you end up seeing the footage of the old man attacked by the dog in Amsterdam?
No, I actually couldn't find it.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I looked and I couldn't find it.
Let me do something I rarely do. Our intrepid producer, Rod, see if you can help John Kiriakou and upload do you want it to the Hangout? Do you want it there, John?
Sure, put it in the Hangout.
Yeah, if you can put it in the Hangout, Rod, I appreciate it. Because I really do want to get your reaction to this. Don't even click it yet. Just get up there. Because I'd like to, well, this will be like a reaction video on YouTube. I want to hear your reaction live. Does that make sense?
Sounds good, yeah. Okay,
but
I've got the Hangout open. So whenever Rod can do it.
So sometime in the next half hour, we'll talk to Mark Sloboda. We'll talk about it afterwards because we're taking people's calls for 45 minutes afterwards. But coming up right after this break, John, our friend Mark Sloboda from Moscow, Russia. That's a little suspicious. Right after this on The Backstory.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I
I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, I mean, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
And we are back on 105.5 FM AM 1390 in Washington, D.C. Joining us now from Moscow for the first time this year, and I assume not the last, our friend Mark Sloboda. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Lee, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the backstory.
Well, Mark, we always love having you. Let me just start with the dumb guy question here. In this situation that's going on between the U.S. and Russia over Ukraine, the Russia has made some very clear and specific demands about what they want to see here. One of the things they want to see is no further NATO encroachment on Russia. And they're so specific and clear in the document that they gave to Washington. I don't see how Washington can just like blow it off or something vague. So let me just ask you bluntly, how dangerous do you think this situation is? Because I'm seeing no sign the U.S. is going to back down on what Russia's asking of them.
Yeah, well, it's an extremely dangerous situation. It isn't necessarily a World War III type situation, but it could see the resumption of a major military conflict in the Ukraine, of a Russian military intervention in the Ukraine with the goal of removing, the U.S.-backed regime that seized power there in 2014, or at least a severe degradation of the Kiev regime's military forces, with the goal of securing the security of the people of eastern Ukraine, the Donbass, that have never accepted the overthrow of the democratically elected Ukrainian government that they overwhelmingly supported in elections in 2014, and also of securing Russia's national security interests. They see what is going on in Ukraine as the frozen conflict status quo there as the de facto NATO-ization of the country, saying that there are some 10,000 NATO, quote, trainers and advisors, unquote, shades of Vietnam on the ground there. The plans for the construction of military bases there by the UK have been announced. The US has been supplying large amounts of lethal and advanced weaponry. And Turkey has, NATO member Turkey has even sold the Kiev regime more advanced combat drones, the TB2 Bayraktars, that in violation of the Minsk Accords, Kiev has used to attack the Donbass. And this is coupled with the ongoing political repression of all opposition in Ukraine. The leader of the political representation of the Donbass, of eastern Ukraine as a whole, the opposition bloc, Viktor Medvedchuk, has been arrested, and he has been charged with politicized treason charges. Interestingly enough, Zelensky has also pursued on the other side the far-right nationalist Poroshenko, the previous president, his so-called European Solidarity Party. Zelensky has now also threatened to charge him with treason if he dares return to the country. All of the media outlets, major media outlets representing the views of the people of East Ukraine, have been shut down. And all of this, Russia sees as the closing of windows, right, for the opportunity of any type of genuine dialogue, first of all, between the regime in Kiev and the voices of East Ukraine, but also of Russia and Ukraine, and Russia and the West, which it sees, particularly the United States, as, you know, essentially having turned Ukraine into a client state since 2014, since the putsch overthrew the government there. And Russia can't accept this status quo any longer because they feel it is deleterious for them. Despite having everyone having rhetorically committed to the Minsk Accords, which are supposed to provide for a political reconciliation between the Kiev regime and the Donbass over the events of the overthrow of the government in 2014, and lead to a new political arrangement in the country that would grant broad autonomy to the East, but return Ukrainian sovereignty over to that region. This has been accepted by everyone, is accepted by, France and Germany, which along with Russia are the guarantors of this deal between Kiev and the Donbass. The U.S. signed on to it. They approved it. It has been enshrined in a UN Security Council resolution as international law. And then Kiev refused to implement it, and the United States and the rest of the West refused to press them on it. And this has gone on for some 6-7 years now, since 2015, with Kiev making absolutely clear that they have no intention of ever fulfilling it as it stands. They simply say it is no longer acceptable. Well, them saying that this deal is no longer acceptable and, you know, continue shelling Donbass daily is no longer acceptable to Russia, especially when they see the creeping NATOization of the country happening at the same time.
Mark, there was barely any media coverage of the Putin-Biden phone call, the most recent one. But what little coverage we got said that Biden has Putin on the ropes right now, and Biden told him, you better stay on your side of the border. It was almost comical. What's the Russian media reporting on this call? How are they covering this?
Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, the call was the contents of it was not made public. Mm-hmm. There was a very limited readout on both sides.
That's right.
And it came at the request of the Russian president. That both sides agreed to, and it appears to have been an attempt by Putin to reach out to Biden personally and make a personal appeal to him before this U.S.-Russia meeting goes ahead on the 10th. Which is not at the presidential level. It is going to be conducted at the Deputy Secretary of State, Deputy Foreign Minister level. And I think that the Kremlin feels that the U.S. State Department, the Russian, cadre there, is particularly hostile and focused on maintaining a conflicted relationship, and is not amenable to any type of compromise, particularly over Ukraine. And so I think this was perhaps an attempt, maybe a hopeless but last-ditch attempt to make a personal appeal to Biden and to once again stress what a serious red line national security interest. On the U.S. side, they've made clear that they do not accept any Russian red lines, that Russia doesn't have any legitimate national security interests outside the country, like, say, the U.S. does over the entire world, and that they don't have the right to issue red lines, something that Obama was famous for declaring red lines. But Russia's not allowed to have any of them, even over something that is as integral to their security, their history, their culture, as Ukraine. And what Russia is demanding is actually, they don't want to take over Ukraine. That is kind of the worst case last scenario. What they are demanding with this, first of all, is all kind of security guarantees involving NATO, but they want Ukraine to be neutral. They want to return the balance of domestic affairs in Ukraine to before the 2014 putsch, where both internally and externally, Ukraine balanced between its own West and East and the West and East in geopolitical terms. And that is how Ukraine has survived since 1991, because it is a national identity and politically divided country, largely along west-east lines. And the Russian demands actually reflect this. And they're not saying, Ukraine must become our client state, or Ukraine has to join the Eurasian Union or the Collective Security Treaty Organization, its NATO analog. In fact, they're saying that it shouldn't. But they're saying that it should also not join NATO and the EU. And this would settle matter between the two of them, creating a new, much further east buffer state. But it would also settle the domestic political and military conflict in Ukraine itself. I don't think the U.S. is willing to accept that anymore, though. As far as they are concerned, they geopolitically flipped Ukraine in 2014, and it's now their territory, and they intend to mark it like a dog, which is what they're doing right now. The Russian government is warning, we can't accept this anymore. And we're serious. And I think this is what Putin said he was satisfied with this phone call. And what he was satisfied with is that Biden seemed to take him seriously. And he's saying, we are going to have to take steps, and they are military technical steps. Now, he didn't say what that is. This is intentionally vague, right? It is the U.S. equivalent, diplomatic speak, of all options are on the table. It could be new missile systems deployed in Kaliningrad, or it could be some level or form of military intervention in Ukraine, or anything, in that range of spectrums. But it is going to be something, whatever Russia feels they need to do. And they feel that what they are asking for, a lot of it revisits, everything that NATO has done to expand and pile up troops and then missile systems on their borders, on Russian borders, since 1997, since the immediate aftermath of the era of the expansion of NATO. And, Russia, Putin continually harkens back to informal promises that were made to sucker naive Gorbachev into, agreeing to the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact and the overseeing the collapse of the Soviet Union, that NATO would not expand one step eastward. Ha ha, we got you, and that's why Putin is trying to demand things in writing, in legalistic form, at the same time understanding that, the U.S. simply won't provide those guarantees. And even if they did, considering its history, pulling out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, the Open Skies Treaty, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, ripping up the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, stepping all over the Conventional Armed Forces in Europe Treaty, the NATO-Russia Founding Act, they wouldn't mean anything. Yeah. But he is making a diplomatic appeal of last resort here before they take some serious steps, whatever it is they feel they have to take.
Well, Mark, I want to take advantage of not just your geopolitical knowledge, which has been great, but John, would you agree with me that this is aptly called a sobering assessment for Mark Sloboda? Yes. Would you say that's fair?
Yes. And I'll tell you what, it's 900% more than what we've gotten in the U.S. media.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to ask about, because the other thing I want to take advantage of is simply the fact that Mark Sabota, like a lot of people, is in Russia. And over here, Mark, and I know this won't shock you, but I have heard, John, nothing about this, really.
Not a word.
Right?
No.
It would be
I was curious myself, and I had to actually go look for it. But yeah, nobody's talking about this. Not a word.
It would be like when the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on.
And that's exactly what Putin is saying. This is the Cuban Missile Crisis for Russia. Wow. He keeps referring to in that terms.
Wow.
And imagine if no one was talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, but everyone was watching F Troop or Bonanza. Or I don't know if those were even on then.
Yeah, they are. They're still on.
But you get the idea. So what I'm curious, Mark, in Russia, when you look at the media, is the Russian media that people, citizens watch, taking this seriously? Because we're certainly not doing it here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're openly discussing the possibility of conflict. Wow. Certainly a renewed conflict in Ukraine with a direct Russian military intervention there, but also, how things could then spin out of control with that. First, with a renewed, war, economic war of sanctions on Russia, how that would go and how that would not go as well for the U.S. as they seems to think it is, and now it's not as much of a threat as they seem to, deterrent or something as they seem to think it is, but also, how such a tense situation then, could always unintentionally spin out of control with some incident, some accident, some misunderstanding, because it will immediately be. I mean, the U.S. And the UK, NATO, they've already said that they will not militarily send troops to Ukraine, right? What they have there, they will evacuate, and they would not directly interfere. But they've already talked about massing troops elsewhere in Eastern Europe, the Baltics, Poland, as a reassurance measure. Not that Russia has any need or designs on Poland or the Baltics. And they've long since acquiesced them to NATO's sphere of influence, but they see this developments in Ukraine since the overthrow of the government there in 2014 as an encroachment they just can't accept anymore. And a lot of things, when Russia's referring to the Cuban Missile Crisis, what a lot of Americans don't understand, they don't understand the history of that crisis, that it was actually started by the U.S. playing nuclear missiles in Turkey.
Yep.
And then the Soviet Union responded by putting nuclear missiles in Cuba. And the crisis was eventually resolved when the U.S. agreed to pull its missiles out of Turkey, and then the Soviet Union agreed to move its missiles out of Cuba. But it was heralded in the U.S. Nothing was mentioned about Turkey at all because of the level of propaganda at the time. It just simply wasn't acknowledged, and it was trumpeted as some U.S. victory rather than a near World War III confrontation that was started by putting missiles next to Russia's boundaries. And Russia is worried about, the U.S. has already put missile systems that are anti-ballistic missile systems, but because they're an Aegis Ashore system, they're easily capable of being refitted to fire cruise missiles, the possibility of nuclear-tipped cruise missiles at Russia. And putting similar systems in Ukraine, that's not on the immediate plans, but Russia sees where this is going with the NATOization of Ukraine. And nuclear systems, if they were, U.S. nuclear system, web missile systems of any type, if they were put in Ukraine, could hit Moscow in 4 minutes. And that is a Cuban Missile Crisis scenario that Russia can't accept.
Yes.
And I'm just going to say, Mark, by the way, Mark, this is the last week John will be on this show. He's moving down to Political Misfits on the schedule.
I heard.
I heard. And so, John, before I throw it to you, to your last question on the backstory, for Mark, I'm just going to comment and say, you and I have been talking about this Netflix film, Don't Look Up, Adam McKay did.
Oh, yeah.
This reminds me of that situation. Here's a serious, grave threat to the lives of every American, right? And Meryl Streep's off sneaking a cigarette. You know what I'm getting at. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
John, right? So, okay, John, what's your last question for Mark here before we run out of time? Great appearance, Mark, as usual.
Mark, the U.S. makes such a big deal about at least appearing to consult with its NATO allies. Where are the Russians in this situation? Who are they consulting? Are they discussing this with the Chinese, with former Soviet states with which they maintain close relations? Who are they seeking support from?
Yeah, I think they're in close cooperation and communication with the Chinese in particular. Of course, there is the Russian, led Collective Security Treaty Organization,
Yes.
but I think it's really the Chinese that Russia is coordinating with on this. Russia has lent China its support on the U.S. Trying to promote separatism and militarize Taiwan against China, and China is returning with reciprocal on the situation with Russia and Ukraine. And while the situations are different, there are also parallels, on U.S. geopolitical encroachment and a fight back against that can be seen in both situations. And if I could make a plug when I could, there are some good things being written, maybe not much in the Western media, but in Western think tankistan, at the Kinsey Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Anatol Lievin, an American, or an American institute anyway, who is a real objective, realist Russian expert, not tainted by exceptionalism or some type of hegemonist point of view. He just wrote a great paper for them, Ending the Threat of War in Ukraine, a Negotiated Solution to the Donbass Conflict and the Crimean Dispute. It is a tour de force. It is a long form. It's a 50-minute read, but you will understand everything from an objective point of view if you read this.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. What about prospects for conflict? Certainly, we were talking about this a lot in the last couple of weeks. It seems to have gone a little bit more quiet. How's it playing in Russia? Yeah. Are the Russians still worried about conflict?
Well, by the way, I think the quiet means the U.S. is now taking it seriously, so we've stopped yapping. That's what I think, Mark.
And there might be something to that, Lee, because that's frequently how we manage foreign policy here. We just cross our fingers and hope it goes away. So that
is it possible that could be right, Mark?
Now, let's be frank. There is no huge Russian military buildup more than there has been for the last 7 years right on the Ukrainian border. There are more Ukrainian troops. They've got 125,000 right on the Donbass there. That's half of their military. But Russia has gone about creating new logistical formations further back from the Ukrainian border, but still in Western Russia, that basically create those options for Russia that it could begin that buildup and begin a military intervention in relatively short form. It's just something that would be seen. Right? It's not something that's going to happen, tomorrow, and you won't know about it until you pick up the papers. But Russia is making clear how serious this situation is for them, and they're making clear this is not a bluff. The U.S. needs to take their national security interests seriously, or Russia will do what it has to do to ensure its national security with regards to the Ukraine. And it has created those options so far without large masses of the troops that would be necessary for an intervention. But, once again, all options are on the table, and they have been set up somewhere on the table, even if not right down on the edge where it is a threat of immediate options being exercised, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'll say this again. Vladimir Putin has once again shown that he is the diplomatic one. I'll also put it. When he comes out of that, he's not bellicose, banging his shoe on the table after that Biden call. He's not boasting. He's not beating his chest. And in fact, Mark, I think you've indicated on the show before, you think, and do you think this is the way a lot of people in Russia feel, citizens, that Putin's been almost too diplomatic, thus far?
Yeah. I mean, to an extent. I mean, it must be said that neither the Russian government nor the Russian people want war with Ukraine, and they don't regard the Ukrainian people as their enemy. They see this is the regime that seized power in Kiev with U.S. backing in 2014, and they don't want a military conflict because they still hope in the course of time to win back the hearts and minds of the majority of the Ukrainian people, maybe not the Western Ukraine much, but the majority of Ukraine. And if they're in a military conflict and Ukraine has a majority conscript military, every Ukrainian boy drafted into uniform that dies is going to be a family that then hates Russia forever. And Russia's well aware of that, and which is why they have really tried everything they can to force a diplomatic, a peaceful political reconciliation while protecting their own national security and, trying to stand up for the interests and, the political representation of the people of East Ukraine at the same time. They don't want a conflict here. And if there is a conflict, I believe that, they will hope, I really seriously hope that they have plans or some type of domestic decapitation strike, involving some type of, counter revolution in Ukraine that could help to remove the government without a full-on military conflict, because Russians don't want to be killing Ukrainians, and most Ukrainians don't want to be killing Russians either, with the exception, obviously, of the Banderites from West Ukraine. That's part of their national identity, is to hate Russians. But no one wants this. No one here wants this. The public doesn't want this, and I would say that the Kremlin doesn't want this. That is why they're making such a big show, and they've made all of this public, so it is not being done. The Western press, governments are all, how dare Russia, make these things public? Well, they don't want it to be brushed under the table. They don't want any, backdoor deals. They want everyone to see this in the light of day, how serious they are, how they are attempting a last diplomatic solution to this.
And here's the irony. If they decide to make a sequel to Don't Look Up, Ukraine, you see what I'm saying? If they decide to do that, Zelensky, the leader in Ukraine, already has a prior relationship with Netflix. He was a Netflix comedian. He had a show on Netflix, right, Mark? And,
where he played a Ukrainian, a school teacher who became a Ukrainian president before that channel that ran that show in Ukraine, the oligarch behind it, Kolomoisky, helped him then become the president of Ukraine.
I think people knew they were electing a actor. What they didn't know is they were electing a hand puppet, right? He's a puppet. That's clearly, he has no thoughts of his own, and he's being ordered around by somebody. It could be Kolomoisky, we don't know who. But this is not right. Am I being mean to Zelensky?
I think that he might have come to office with some type of ideas. I do think that he is under Kolomoisky's influence to some degree, but he has also become hostage to what the Maidan regime, to the ultranationalists in Ukraine, where he has to keep them on side, or he would face another far-right revolution in his own country, as well as his own part of the country, as well as the threat from Donbass with Russian support, as well as the U.S. pressure, the constant threats of turning off the IMF spigot that props his regime up. Biden himself threatened that, for the removal of Ukrainian officials that he did not want investigating the shady business that his son had a plum no-show, board position on. He was boasting about that, and that shows clearly the type of client-state relationship that not only the U.S. has with the regime in Kiev that Zelensky has inherited, but also that Biden personally had as effectively, Obama's viceroy over the newly geopolitically flipped Butch Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, fantastic appearance. Thanks so much. Great appearance, as usual. Mark Sloboda, geopolitical analyst straight out of Moscow. And, John, Mark has set us up perfectly for what I wanted to talk about after this, which is as we approach January 6th, and they're talking about the threat to democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll talk about that right after this on The Backstory.
Every day we ask questions.
How is Facebook going to prevent suicides?
Well, do you see this as being a human rights violation?
Are the cows really stinking up the planet that much?
To move ideas forward.
A gravitational wave is a ripple in the fabric of space and time.
I don't think the launch of the satellite proves anything at all.
Where do good ideas come from? We connect with independent thinkers, hear their ideas, and create stimulating debates on real issues.
The Dow is in a correction. As I said, commodities across the globe are collapsing. Why is that the case? Because we are in a global recession.
That is set to change because Iran has approximately about 50 million barrels, which it had put in storage during the height of the sanctions regime, and that's ready to be released as soon as possible.
Where is the money?
The super rich individuals and the world's biggest companies are able to hide money in tax havens.
Is there a solution to the crisis?
No, because I don't think anything useful has come out of any of the policy reform discussions with respect to financial reform.
They give us answers we aren't always prepared for.
What are the chances that the report would make Israeli authorities to review their policies towards the Palestinians?
Oh, probably zero.
This recession will be even worse than it was in 2008.
But that would be the nasty way for it to happen, you know. But because of Guantanamo, the U.S. is no longer taking so many prisoners, so instead of taking prisoners, they kill people.
A lot of people think that he's now unelectable and a bad leader.
Wow, that's just so much information to take in.
Pay attention, there'll be a test on this later.
Taking notes.
Welcome to the show.
Wow, this is crazy. We're definitely talking sci-fi over here. From 20 years ago, people would never have believed this. Crazy times we're living in.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around this story. This is a fantastic story.
Yes, it is a fantastic story, and it's a worldwide problem.
Welcome to the party.
And we are back on The Backstory, and we're taking calls for the next 45 minutes. 202-521-1320. 202-521-1320. Now, John, before we get to now, Saul, did I hear we had Tarif on?
Yes.
Tarif, I'll get to you in 1 second. I think I'll try. So, John, the thing I wanted to mention is that I saw in the USA Today, the Gannett paper, they had a poll that they had commissioned. And what they found is that democracy is under threat, they're saying.
Oh, I saw that. That democracy will end by the end of 2024.
Well, here's what I thought was interesting about that poll is that they said that there's different, you know, half the people who took the poll feel democracy is under threat because of the Democrats.
Right.
And half of people who took the poll think it's in threat because of the Republicans.
Exactly.
Which is very telling, right? Right. That's
very telling indeed. Yes.
And that's
shows you how split we are.
Yeah, it explains a lot about where we are right now as a nation. And what I'll say about that is, you know, everyone likes to focus, and I saw they like to push this. They like to say there's no proof that the vote was rigged, right? You'll hear that all over the place. There's no proof the vote was rigged. I don't want to talk about the vote. Anytime you had a legitimate story, the Hunter Biden laptop story, and it's not just that social media companies censored it. That's not what happened.
Right.
What happened was intelligence community officials came out, right?
That's right.
And said, this is Russian disinformation.
That's right.
And they were completely lying.
Yes, they were lying to us.
Right? And
absolutely,
that pressured the social media companies, right?
Yes.
Into censoring not just random blogger number 4, but the New York Post, a major metropolitan newspaper, was banned from social media for reporting this story.
Yeah. Insane.
If you were to fill in any other country, you were going to say, in the South Korean election, there was a story about one of the candidates that was a legitimate story. And then South Korean intelligence officials said it's North Korean disinformation, and they censored the story. You couldn't call that a fair election.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Am I missing something?
No. We've gone completely overboard when it comes with this censorship, this political censorship that we've seen for the last year or two. It's just beyond the pale.
And I'll remind everybody again, what's mostly disturbing to me about this, and lots disturbing about it, but the fact that there was direct, I'll say government involvement, but I could say shadow government, deep state involvement. In other words, the 17 officials of the intelligence community are the unelected representatives of the second form, to use Peter Dale Scott's term, shadow government. I don't like to use that term because shadow government makes it sound like I'm talking about something conspiratorial and probably false.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
I'm not talking about that. The deep state, as Peter Dale Scott's defined it, there's no question. Here's what happens. Presidents have 8-year terms, right? But there are people
up to 8 years.
Up to 8 years, right? They have 2 4-year terms, but that's it.
That's it.
But John, you know this. There are people down in Langley who've been there 20, 30 years.
Oh, in fact,
right?
I said this when Donald Trump was first elected president. CNN called me and they asked me to go on one afternoon, and it was because Trump had said that the CIA was part of the deep state, and then you remember Schumer said, "Oh, you don't want to make the CIA angry. They have 9 ways from Sunday to get back at you." And so I went on CNN, and they asked me, "What did Schumer mean by that?" And I said, "Well, at the CIA, presidents come and go all the time. Right. Presidents come and go. But people in positions of leadership at the CIA have been there for 25, 30, 35 years. And if they don't like this president or his policies, they just wait him out because they know he's going to go. And somebody else is going to finally come in. And so what they can do is slow roll intelligence operations. Maybe they don't go after that high-placed source. Maybe they don't implement that operation that the new president wants. They just ignore him. And they wait for him to go, and it always works. I said they did it to Jimmy Carter. They did it to a lesser extent with Bill Clinton, and they absolutely did it with Donald Trump.
And they did it to support. The term deep state, like I say, is a Peter Dale Scott term. But I like the term persistent state.
Yeah, and like Brian Becker used to say, or just the state. You know, this is
That's a good point.
Government that we've given ourselves. And we shouldn't be shocked that there's a deep state, that it's working in the shadows, and there's little to no oversight. This is the system that we've given ourselves, and it's a mistake.
And they clearly helped to bury the Hunter Biden story,
100%.
Which goes right back, right?
Definitely.
By saying it was Russian disinformation. By the way, notice they didn't. What I've noticed is when you got to listen very carefully, everyone. When you hear someone saying something is Russian disinformation, try to glean whether they're saying it's false. They're implying it is, right, John?
Right. Yeah, that's the implication, but that's not what they're saying specifically.
Right.
Is it
They're
false?
saying it benefits. They're saying it benefits Russia.
Right. Well, you remember when the Monica Lewinsky story broke, it was broken by the National Enquirer of all things. And people were saying, oh, well, that's trash. That's a rag. Well, that's not the issue. Is it true is the issue. And it turned out to be true.
Yes. 202-521-1320. Tarif, thanks for holding. What's on your mind?
Thank you, gentlemen, for taking my call. For hashtag free Julian Assange and hashtag NIH need to be investigated. I have two comments dealing with Julian Assange. First comment is dealing with the South China Morning Post journalist came out with a video a couple of days ago saying that the U.S. is hypocrites on this subject dealing with Julian Assange, that if Julian Assange was leaking information on China, war crimes or genocide or corruption, he'd be held as a hero because he leaked information on the U.S. to see him as a criminal, and he threw him underneath the bus. Basically, that's not right. You know, you got to have freedom of speech for all. I'm dealing with Julian Assange. Is AMLO came out a couple of days ago reiterating that he would give Julian Assange asylum, and also he brought up the fact on the last days of Trump, he wrote Trump a letter in hopes that, you know, Trump would pardon Julian Assange and he'll give Julian Assange asylum. Trump never got back with him with that letter. So, yeah, that's all I want to say. Two comments.
Good stuff.
So, Sean, you know quite a bit about the Assange story, including insider stuff, because you talk to people. Do you know anything new on the Assange story in the last minute or so we got left here? A couple minutes?
No, I spoke with Julian's dad day before yesterday, and they haven't yet formally appealed to the UK Supreme Court, but that's coming in the next couple of weeks. But no, they're just, you know, strategizing and marching and protesting, and fingers crossed. I mentioned in a thing I did over the weekend for the Assange Defense Committee and Consortium News that this thing could drag on for another year, because no matter who wins in the British Supreme Court, the loser is going to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights. And so this thing's not over yet. But with that said, I also opined that, you know, Joe Biden really ought to just declare victory and walk away. You know, just say, look, we won. He's essentially been locked up for the last 10 years. And that whole 10 years, essentially, it's been solitary confinement. We win, and we're going to walk away and call it even. He won't do that, of course, but he should.
No, I agree. You know, I think the problem the Biden administration has, to some extent, is, quite frankly, that they are in a situation where all they can do is end up making Julian Assange a martyr and a hero. If Assange does die in custody, that's not a big benefit to them.
No, you're right.
Right? You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
I don't want to sound macabre, and it would be horrible and everything, but that's not a victory for them. They've already got what they need. They've shut Assange up, effectively.
Yes.
Does that make sense? In other words, I'm not sure what his death adds to what they're doing. All it does is it gives them, like I say, a martyr.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't think that's what they want. And so, you know, again, it's not that I'm overly sympathetic with the Biden administration on this. I'm not. But realistically, that's what's going on. Realistically, they in a no-win situation.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, I think, does make some sense. Because think about it. Again, they've silenced him already. They've already got that.
They have. They've wrecked the guy.
We got more conversation and taking your calls, 202-521-1320. Coming up, and Kim Iverson next hour on The Backstory.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are live from America and just outside the Matrix. It is time for the second hour, last hour today of the show that brings you the truth behind the headlines. I'm investigative journalist Lee Stranahan.
And I'm former CIA officer John Kiriakou.
And this is The Backstory. Thanks again to Mark Sloboda for joining us. Always great to have Mark on the show. And that was, if I say it was sobering, that's why I started.
Yeah.
But that's why I started with that question, which is, how scary is this? And I'll be honest, it seemed scary to me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
In a sense, I was hoping Mark would say, no, you're being overreactive, it's fine. However, I've interviewed Mark enough where I knew he'd give me this straight,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
and if he thought it was, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And let me ask you this, John. If you had a doctor, would you rather want someone who pussyfoots around and tells you how great your hair looks?
No.
Or would you
Give it to me straight.
Says, you got 6 months. Sorry.
Yep. Give it to me straight.
So Mark Sloboda is that doctor. I'm just saying. Kim Iverson's joining us this hour, and we're taking your calls, 202-521-1320. It's The Backstory. And, you pointed it out, but it's true, and it's where I was headed as well. I'm not seeing anything in the media that's taking this very serious situation very seriously. And it really does remind me of Don't Look Up. It really does. Which is, here's a big threat. This is a bigger, more imminent threat. Global warming, I'm not even debating it. But this is something happening now. This could, a serious war could break out in the next 2 weeks, let's say. Right?
Right.
And I'm not trying to freak anybody out. But no, really, that's what we just heard. And that's sure what it seems like. Because now I have a prediction, and I'm curious about this because you know so much about D.C., John. I was talking to a friend of mine about how this might play out. And I said what the Biden administration would do, and Congress would go along with it, is basically give in and say nothing. They'd still declare some victory in some area. And then the media would go along with that, too. The media would not say, hey, they backed off the NATO forces, because they're not even acknowledging their existence. So I would say that silence from the Biden administration is music to my ears. What say you, John?
I have to agree with you, Lee. First of all, I think we should assume that we're not going to hear anything about this from Congress. Nothing. For whatever reason, Congress seems to have abdicated its oversight responsibilities. There used to be complaints that here in the United States we had 535 secretaries of state. And that's just not the case anymore. It's like nobody cares about foreign affairs or foreign policy. But yeah, I think that I could see the Biden administration just saying that we've come out on top and not really pushing this issue anymore. We have a very complicated long-term relationship with the Russians. Very, very complicated, whether it's been Russia or it's been the Soviet Union. And we have armies of people in government who are supposed to be experts on this kind of thing. And sometimes experts outwit themselves. You remember during the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy received 2 contradictory letters from the Russian ambassador. And these armies of Soviet experts we're debating, well, should we do this? Should we do that? Should we change the policy? Should we just write one letter in response to the two letters? And should we call them on their flip-flop on this issue? And then finally, Kenny O'Donnell, who was the senior advisor to the president, said, let's just pretend we didn't receive the letter that we don't like. And that's what they ended up doing. They responded to the letter from Khrushchev that was proposing a solution. They ignored the threatening letter, and we ended up coming up with the deal. Mark alluded to the deal. You know, we're the ones actually that started the Cuban Missile Crisis by putting nuclear-tipped missiles in eastern Turkey. And so the Soviets responded by sending missiles to Cuba. So the deal was, we'll take apart our missiles in Turkey if you withdraw your missiles from Cuba. And it worked.
Well, you know, one of the other poignant parts about that story that I don't think was revealed for decades was the private letter that JFK exchanged with Nikita Khrushchev. You've seen those, right?
Oh, yes.
And you know what I mean by poignant. What happened was JFK and Khrushchev also had a completely private channel where they were sending letters just to each other.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
It was outside the channel. And both men took the threat very seriously.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean by poignant. And they were talking about the sea and, you know, JFK's naval experience. Khrushchev brought that up. And you remember, if anyone hasn't found them, go find those letters, because you know what I'm talking about, Sean, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we've got the so-called hotline. We've always had the hotline back to the 50s, the early 60s when we had it with the Soviets. But the hotline, you know, the red phone that they have in the movies, dozens of people have access to that thing. And so if one leader calls the other leader, it's not a private conversation by any means. You know, I mentioned a couple of months ago, Lee, that when a president has a conversation with another foreign leader, there are at least a dozen people on the line, right? The NSC note takers, the CIA, the State Department, DOD has somebody on the line. And then the other side has all their people on the line, too. Well, that's how it is with the red phone. It's mostly military and intelligence. It's less frequently the State Department. But what you're talking about is an actual back channel. Like in the event that, oh, crap, this thing is spiraling out of control, I need to speak directly to the president. In fact, when the United States got word that there was going to be a coup attempt against Mikhail Gorbachev. That was the channel that President George H.W. Bush used, because he had to assume that the Soviet defense ministry people that would have been listening in on the call were involved in the coup, and he would have assumed correctly. And so he used that special back channel to speak directly to Gorbachev.
Now, I want to say I haven't checked it because I've been busy posting the show and everything. But did we get the video up, Saul, Rod? Do we have that for John?
Yeah, it was shockingly violently.
Okay, you know what? Have you watched that already?
I watched it, yeah.
Okay, well, let's pretend, shall we? Watch it again.
Okay.
And just give your play-by-play on this video.
Okay, so this is a video. The source was kind of surprising. I've never heard of the source before. Where is it?
Gorilla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to it? Let me find it. Open my Hangouts again. Okay, got it.
People haven't.
Yeah.
Okay. So
if you want to see it was posted on Twitter. Let's see here, under the name disclose.tv. It's at disclose.tv. And it says, now, people mauled by police dogs, beaten with batons at unauthorized protest against COVID restrictions in Amsterdam. You click on the link, and it immediately starts with this shocking footage of this man being literally mauled by a police dog. So he's being so heartily bitten by this dog that the dog actually spins him around and makes him face plant. Another thing that's kind of crazy to me, Lee, is that these people who appear to be cops or cop-like people, they're not wearing uniforms. They're dressed in what looks to be all black, or it might be a dark navy. I'm not sure.
The guys who rush over.
The guys who rush over, and they all have batons. Their faces are obscured. They're wearing riot helmets. Some of them have plastic face coverings. But this demonstration, let me repeat that. The reaction to this demonstration is shockingly violent. So again, if you go on Twitter, it's @DiscloseTV. Check it out.
And you see why I wanted you to see it. There's no way me describing it. It's worse than my description. Right?
We've not seen anything like this in the United States.
Now, the other thing that happened I saw this morning is in Germany. There was a woman on a police van, and people are outside, like across the street, and they start beating her. And I don't speak much German, but I know the word Frau. And one of the guys watching is saying, basically, you're beating a woman up. That's what's going on there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you're beating up a woman. Right.
And so what I'm saying is, when you've got a situation, we'll be talking to Kim Iverson this hour. This is not good for governments worldwide, that this is happening worldwide. People see this, and I think they can't help, it's going to have the effect. And again, I think it's a mistake for people to conflate the medical issue with the government issue. But you know who doesn't care about that? The government.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't care at all. And the media, this is what I'm saying, even the stuff that's happening where you get, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, a congresswoman, like her or not, she's a congresswoman.
Mm-hmm.
And then when social media companies are banning her, I said it before, I'll say it again. I believe in the school of more voices, not less. Mm-hmm. I believe that, and that's from, I forget which Supreme Court justice, Brandeis, maybe, I forget who it was. But what they said, was the solution for bad speech is more speech. Whoever said that was a Supreme Court statement.
Yeah.
That if you don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene's point or anybody's point, debate it. Come up with better arguments. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the solution.
Yeah.
Right, John? Or what do you think?
I agree. But the implication of these private companies' actions, Twitter and Facebook specifically, is that most people are so stupid or so gullible that they can't make those decisions for themselves. And I'll tell you who's helping them arrive at that point. I don't know, Lee, if you've seen CNN in the last 2 or 3 days, but
no.
It's like 24/7 reporting on January 6th anniversary is coming up soon. It's the greatest threat to our democracy since the Civil War. It's the greatest terrorist attack on American soil since 9/11. We have to replay all the videos, right? And what they've begun doing, it's very clever from a propaganda point of view, is they've been going to Trump rallies and asking pro-Trump people about January 6th. And of course, the clips that they run are the most reactionary right-wing lunatics that they interview. They're not interviewing people who said, yeah, it was a shame that it turned violent. It shouldn't have turned violent. Lives were lost.
Right.
What they're saying is it was the deep state that did it. These weren't Trump people. They were dressed as Trump people. They were all FBI agents flying Trump flags. They were Black Lives Matter. They were Antifa. Republicans wouldn't do something like that. Only Democrats would do something like that. A Republican wouldn't hit a policeman. Blue Lives Matter. These were all Antifa disguised as Trump people. And then the reporter's like, I'm from Northern Ireland. And in Northern Ireland, we know that these people are insane. Like, that's not reporting. That's not news. It's propaganda.
But I would say that, you know, the advantage of it, I was listening to a book today, and they say one of the things about mentally resilient people is they handle situations with gratitude. They don't get bitter about things. They see, and it's kind of the way I feel about the situation that happened with my divorce, for instance. I really don't feel bitter about it. I don't know if that comes across. I don't know if I come across bitter. And if I did, I don't know if you tell me. But I'm really not.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a thing that happened. And in a sense, I'm grateful for it. That being said, there are benefits to all this propaganda from places like CNN. Let's be grateful to them. They've exposed who they are. Anybody who wasn't clear on how bad the U.S. media was, here you go.
Yeah, it's clear. It's clear now.
Right. Now, by the way, it's probably been clear for a long time, actually.
Yeah.
Right. If you've really been paying attention to politics, more so than I was, because when I first started to figure this out, I was shocked. When the first story I reported on, the John Edwards story, I was shocked that I'd figured it out and none of these professional news organizations seemed to.
Right.
And then I started to understand the purpose of the news organizations. And what we're seeing now is the mask has been completely ripped off. So anybody, but by the way, if people, here's what people make for a mistake. They think to themselves, well, I'm not fooled by CNN. Guess what? Lots of people are, right?
Yeah. And in all fairness, it's not just CNN, but all of them. You know, we used to say the big three, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. I'd throw in Newsmax and OAN now. You watch some of these clips and you're like, what planet do you live on? And that's why, you know, like you watch Deutsche Welle and Al Jazeera and you check out these other usually foreign outlets. I do the same thing. It takes me hours to get through the news every morning because I have to check so many sites and figure out, you know, through critical thinking, what's true and what's propaganda. You have to sort of be trained to recognize propaganda these days because it's oftentimes very, very convincing.
So I did my second news roundup. I did that news roundup, and it went better today, just technically. And I'm figuring it out more and blah, blah, blah. But in preparing for that, listening to the news, and I'm thinking about here's an example, John. Here's a segment I might start doing on that show. I used to do this over at Populous TV in a newsletter where I'd take like Breitbart. I'd have to look and see who else. What's the big side on the Democratic left right now? Yeah, back in the day.
Raw Story. Huffington Post, Raw Story. Yeah.
Huffington Post, and again, I'm saying somebody used to write there.
Yep.
It really kind of sucks now because
I stopped reading Huffington Post.
The thing that was interesting about HuffPost was the independent voices that would just get up there.
Yes.
So even if you didn't agree with, now it's all like they've got reporters and everything. But let's go with Raw Story, okay? Ingrid, I see I'll get to you in 1 second. Anyway, what I would do is build into the morning roundup. I'd just show the headlines. Here's what Breitbart's top story is. Here's what Raw Story's top story is.
Yeah.
Here's what.
Yeah, I like that.
And the advantage of it is you can see the spin even in the second. You know, if I use the term mainstream media, here's what I mean by that. I mean, they're on basic cable. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
See, if you buy cable TV,
right,
you get CNN.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
You've got people like Joe Rogan. We'll talk about Rogan when Kim Iverson's on shortly. They actually have a bigger audience than CNN.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But still, and you know the funniest thing, I don't get to Ingrid, I saw somebody say on Twitter, and it's somebody who follows me, so I wasn't trying to piss them off, so I just said nothing. But they were like, this shows that it's individuals, not big corporate media. Hey, Joe Rogan worked for NBC, and Spotify's a big company.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan's not a guy operating out of his basement. Right?
Yep. Yep.
And I'm not knocking him. I'm saying when I saw somebody say that, I'm like, well, that's unrealistic. Rogan was helped immeasurably by being picked up by Spotify. A, it paid him well. B, because it was the biggest contract ever in podcasting, he got those headlines. And here's the thing. Let's say Spotify fired Joe Rogan tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
This goes back to what I was saying about Assange. Yeah, you know, let me make an analogy to Obi-Wan Kenobi. In his battle with Darth Vader in the first Star Wars film, he said, if you kill me, you only make me stronger. Remember that? I'm done.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
If Joe Rogan got fired tomorrow because of all the press he's gotten, he could go independent tomorrow and he'd be free. Well, I don't know what his contract is, obviously. But I'm just saying, but to get to that point, he had to get the biggest contract, blah, 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 blah. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so I want people to be realistic about the way the media game works. I can't think of anyone, John, can you? Tell me. Who's gotten big with no media backing at any point in their career.
Oh, no. You know, music is one thing where time was you could just, post your songs on YouTube and somebody would discover you and you became Justin Bieber. But in terms of news, no, it's not possible. No. And you look at the people who are big now, like Glenn Greenwald, big independents, like Glenn Greenwald or what's his name from Rolling Stone. They're both on Substack now.
Matt Taibbi.
Matt Taibbi, thank you.
Yes.
They got their starts with big outlets and then went independent later.
And by the way, that's possible. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But the
reverse is not possible.
It hasn't happened yet. I think it will happen. There will be somebody who just builds on that, right? But it ain't Rogan. And I'm not knocking him. I just want people to understand that realistically, he's not some guy who started live streaming from his basement and then built the audience he built. That's not what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, if anybody's out there wanting to live stream and do that stuff, go for it. But don't compare yourself to a Joe Rogan or whoever, or a Glenn Greenwald or Matt Taibbi, because they all did have, like we say, in their background, we have that 202-521-1320. Ingrid, what is on your mind?
Well, I want to reply to your media talk, but just first, I want to thank John. I'm so grateful. If he really does spend hours going through the news, that makes me feel so much better. I thought I was just old and slow.
Thank you, Ingrid. No, I really do. I really do. I get up and the first 3 hours of my day is just news.
Great. Well, Lee, when you say CNN has exposed themselves and now people are beginning to see, I can't believe you're in contact with many, normies, because people that I'm aware of, either they're on one side or the other, and they're just more dug in. And the people, anyone who sees this is somebody who was suspicious and not believing of the media in the first place. But
well, I think I think, but I said that. I did say, if people think, I said CNN's still very influential with some people, but there are certain things. That's why I like to avoid unanswerable arguments, like who pulled the trigger on JFK. I don't know, and no one's ever shown me the proof of that. But the George Joanides thing, that's provable. On the election, the voter stuff, I didn't count the votes. I don't know, right? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
It's unanswerable. But on the Hunter Biden laptop story, we know what happened there, and that should worry people. There's enough going on with CNN that if you approach somebody reasonably, I think you could have a conversation. I don't talk to, I talk to my friends who tend to agree with me, and I'll leave it at that. When I see people who, but I have friends who don't agree politically, who are more normal, and then I know a couple people, some of whom I may have been married to at one point, not for a while. I don't want to say anything because their son may be on fault lines, but I'm just saying, my first wife is very left, in a way where, I was asking her how our son was, how Shane was, because he spent Christmas with her. And I got this long reply, and she was saying stuff about COVID-19, and she's one of those people who's really angry about people who are skeptical of vaccines. That's a nice for Kim Iverson, by the way. And I was just like, yeah, those people exist, but I don't talk to them much. You know what I'm saying? And she probably wouldn't be talking to me if we didn't have a child in common. But I know there are people who are really adamantly. You talked about your sister, John.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about how your sister was adamant on the gender thing, for instance. You said that the other day.
Yes.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
Yes. No, that's right. She kind of surprised me.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. There is that surprise. But, Ingrid, we only got a couple minutes left here, so make your second point, please.
That was my second point. I mean, the first point was that I spend a lot of time reading the news, too.
Okay, got it. Okay, good. No, and again, and thanks for the call, Ingrid. Great call, as usual. With me, I just do it before I go to bed, when I wake up. You know what I'm saying, John? If I'm making breakfast.
Yep.
And a lot of it is trying to listen to a lot of different sources, because that helps you understand the way stories are framed.
Absolutely.
For the left and for the right. And anybody who, John, you've been listening to me for the better part of a year. I go after the right, Fox and Breitbart, all the time.
Yeah, you do. That's right.
And it's because ultimately, I think that they are not helping their audience, and they're keeping the status quo establishment in place. You follow me?
Yep.
Trump, whatever, he turned out to be a very establishment president, despite, I would say, I guess, his best efforts. I think Trump did as well as he could do. I don't think anybody expecting better from a second term is deluding themselves. I will say that.
Yeah.
And some people don't want to hear that. And they just go, well, he's better than Biden. Well, John's tuna sandwich from last week is better than Biden. That's a fairly low standard. I'm not knocking your tuna sandwich, John.
No.
But you know what I'm saying.
I do.
That's a low standard. Coming up right after this, let's take a short break. When we come back, the great Kim Iverson will be joining us here on The Backstory.
in traffic? No problem. Stay informed. Stay tuned to Radio Sputnik on 105.5 FM or 1390 AM in the Washington, D.C. area. Need more? Follow us on Facebook or check us out on SputnikNews.com.
When the going gets tough, the powerful want propaganda. But we won't let them cancel the facts. Whether you're woke or drowsy, we know that you can handle the truth, and we're giving it to you every morning. Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan every Monday through Friday from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Your first stop for sanity in a world gone mad.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Hi, I'm political analyst Garland Nixon.
And I'm political scientist, author, and nationally syndicated columnist Dr. Wilmer Leon.
We're the co-hosts for The Critical Hour, airing Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C.
We close out your day with a thorough and hard-hitting analysis of the day's top stories, where we bring in brilliant scholars, authors, and investigative journalists from around the world.
And on Fridays, it's panel time, when we do a roundup of the week's most important issues.
Join us to keep up with the world's top stories.
Enjoy an in-depth analysis.
And have a little fun along the way. Listen to our show,
The Critical Hour, Monday through Fridays on Radio Sputnik.
We are back, 105.5 FM, AM 1390 in Washington, D.C. And again, we are now 3.5 shows from John Kiriakou no longer being the co-host here on The Backstory, John moving over to Political Misfits. And John, I'm going to say this again. I don't want to get all weepy and teary-eyed here, but do me a favor.
Yeah.
If sometimes, let's have you on. You can do it by phone, so you don't have to come in, right?
Sure.
No, seriously.
Yeah. No, I'd love to.
And let's do it sometimes without a topic. You know, a lot of times we'll bring people on, and you, John Kiriakou, of course, with your background, if there's a CIA issue,
right,
you're the go-to guy for a lot of people.
Yeah, I get called a lot. Yeah.
But I just like, I can't say the word I want to say, shooting the poop,
right,
shall we say.
Yep.
Right? That's one of the things I've really enjoyed in the year that we've worked together on the show.
Me too.
It's just rapping about issues.
Oh, yeah.
And you're welcome back anytime, and sometimes
Thank you, sir.
We'll bring you back and just yap about stuff. Does that make sense?
I would enjoy that very much. That
I'm
would
not
be a lot of
knocking
fun.
topics. We might do that too.
Yeah, but yeah, just to sit and shoot the breeze. It's nice.
Yeah. So there we go. Joining us now, great friend of the show, first time on, and by the way, let me say this too. It's being fair. The first female guest we've had this year, John.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Ingrid's a caller. She's a lady, but I'm just saying, Kim Iverson is the first female guest of the year on The Backstory. Hey, Kim, how you doing?
I want you guys to know that I identify as non-binary now. So you still
really?
can. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
You're
identify as everything now.
Honestly, I have trouble keeping it all straight. We work with some trans people, and I have this bad habit, and I swear to God I'm not doing it on purpose, but I walk into the studio and I say, "Hey guys," and then I say, "Hi folks, sorry, sorry."
I call everybody guys. I say guys to everyone also. But it's interesting and not to by any means take away from people who genuinely, who are trans and who live, I'm just making good fun. And we got to all be able to laugh at ourselves and each other.
Right. That is right.
Well, now, Kim, there's a lot of COVID news in the news right now. And so let's talk about some of that. John and I were talking about these protests happening around the world and the violent reactions that we've seen in Amsterdam and in Germany. We've not seen that level of violence here in the U.S. yet, although a lot of people complain about things. What do you think the state is of COVID nation in America right now, Kim?
Well, I think the reason why we're not seeing that violent backlash is because we do live in a federation. So if people are really, truly fed up with the mandates, they move. I mean, that's what we're seeing. So, and the mandates, are coming into play in areas that are really, really, really blue, and they're heavily supported by the majority of the population. But if there were to be federal mandates, for example, I think we would see violence, protests break out if, for example, the federal government came out and said, you have to be vaccinated to fly domestically. I think then we would see people in Texas and Florida, there would be a lot of, I think, unrest in the population, people saying, wow, now you're really limiting me. You're not letting me travel to a free state like Florida and let me go. You're not letting me do what I want to do. So I think what's kept us from all of that is that we are a federation, and we people can choose to move state to state if they want. And we've seen that happen throughout this pandemic. People have been picking up and moving. So, these other countries, they're implementing countrywide mandates. And I think that's what's really causing a lot of the unrest. But they've been going strong. Those protests are massive. They're massive. And they've been going on now for months.
Now,
not
Kim,
letting up.
Before I throw it to you, John, one quick question for you, Kim. Recently, Joe Biden came out and said, John, did you see this, where Joe Biden said, this is not a federal problem, COVID. It's going to be solved at a state level. Did you see him say that?
Yeah, and that's exactly the opposite of what the Democratic Party's position on this is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the exact opposite. It's what he was kind of making fun of Trump for saying. This is not a federal issue.
Right.
So, Kim, what did you think of that?
I think the Democrats are having to change. I mean, I think they're realizing that there's nothing stopping this virus, that everything that everyone has attempted to do, country to country, nothing has worked. I mean, the only thing that seems to work is, the old adage, don't test, and then you won't have any cases, right? Like, that's the only way some countries have been able to maybe get it under control, quote unquote. But I think Democrats are now starting to realize that they're just going to have to learn to live with the virus, that it isn't going anywhere, that COVID-0 is a pipe dream, that even controlling the spread of the virus is very difficult to do when it's an invisible enemy that's swirling around in the air. And so I think they're starting, I think Biden, one thing I've always appreciated about him is he doesn't play into the culture war as much as other Democrats do. Biden tries to actually stay out of that. I really appreciate that about him. And I think the war on the virus has been one of those things. It's turned into political culture warfare rather than actual science. So Biden saying, look, we're going to have to handle this federally. I just think he's, despite all of his flaws, I do think there are certain circumstances where the guy just speaks sense because he's not speaking politics. So I think that's what that was.
Tell us a little bit about Florida. It's funny to me that in Florida, they have a governor who is immensely popular in Ron DeSantis. You look at the polls, his approval ratings are well into the 60s, right? Above 60%. No Democrats really of any note are lining up to run against him, except maybe Charlie Crist, who loses every race that he runs statewide since he was governor, decades ago. But in the last 3 weeks, they have a 965% increase in the number of confirmed COVID cases. So on the one hand, this seems like it would be tailor-made for the Democrats to come down on DeSantis like a ton of bricks. But on the other hand, Floridians seem to like the policy that the Omicron variant isn't killing anybody, or if it is, it's killed one person in Texas that we know of. And there's no mandate. So tell us a little bit about the politics at play there. Who comes out on top in this scenario?
Ron DeSantis Ron DeSantis wins. and if he runs for president, I think he wins. Ron DeSantis, I think has handled this pandemic better than any other governor. And that is even going from the beginning when vaccine rollout came out. If you remember now, looking back, that all of the other governors were rolling out the vaccines for essential workers. So they were giving these shots to like 22-year-old grocery baggers. Ron DeSantis was like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to do that. I'm giving this to my elderly population. Right. So he rolled it out for what we now, I think anybody listening now that we're 2 years into this would say, yeah, that makes the absolute most sense because we know who dies of COVID. We know who the high risk are. Mm-hmm. So, he has, I feel like, the hindsight for a lot of people will look back at Florida and say they didn't do all that poorly for the, they did, no one wins with COVID. No one beats the virus. There's no way that that they win. It's just a lot of places realize there is nothing you can do really. And so all you can do is try your best and try to protect the people that you can protect. And really the virus is going to sweep around and everybody's going to get it and yada, yada. So I think with Florida, look, they don't have any deaths right now. I mean, their daily average is lower than it's ever been during this entire pandemic. It is lower today than it has ever been.
Yes.
So, cases are surging. Deaths are the lowest ever. Cases are the highest ever. They're proving the point that Omicron is not a danger, and they're living their lives. And people like AOC are flocking to Florida.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I live in, communist California, I guess. I don't know what this is, totalitarian California. And
People's Republic of California.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, the People's Republic of California. And you can't go anywhere without showing your papers.
Right.
And
now, let me ask you this, Kim. Explain, because the big story that no one, and I define what the mainstream media is, people on basic cable, is talking about, is this Joe Rogan interview with Dr. Malcolm. Then Dr. Malcolm gets
Robert Malone.
Malone, forgive me. Malone gets thrown off of Twitter. Then, after they throw him off Twitter, Malone's name starts trending, and it makes him bigger than ever. It's the Streisand effect on steroids. So, Kim, what was your take on that? And how important is Joe Rogan becoming in this debate, discussion, whatever you call it, about COVID-19 in this country? Kim?
I think Joe Rogan exposes the reality of what's actually going on. I mean, Joe Rogan, we've seen the ratings come out. He has 11 million viewers on average, and everybody else, he beats out every single cable network almost combined. Like you could combine all their viewers together, and Joe Rogan still edges them out. So, what we're seeing is Joe Rogan is obviously, based on the numbers, the number one larger than life media personality.
Definitely.
And that is showcasing the reality of what's going on. We're being gaslit by the media. They're saying, no, everybody thinks this, everybody's doing that, everybody believes this. And meanwhile, everybody's actually listening to Joe Rogan. And then they're saying, but then you got Eric Swalwell coming out the other day trying to make it like Joe Rogan turns people into extremists. I don't know if you saw his tweet, but he was trying to blame Joe Rogan and I don't know who else he was Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan for, causing extremism in America. And it's like, you guys are just missing the mark. People aren't believing you. People aren't listening to you, Democrats. Like people are listening to Joe Rogan and others like Joe Rogan. Dr. Robert Malone was actually already fairly big. People really knew who he was prior to this. But that's the thing. Mainstream media never talked about him. Yet millions of people knew who Robert Malone was. That's why he was on Joe Rogan's show. And, because it was such an uproar, what he was saying, him being removed from Twitter, all of that. So, there's like an alternate reality that is the real reality that's happening. And it's this kind of underground culture that is actually the mainstream. It's actually the majority.
Mm-hmm.
And when I don't know when mainstream media will catch up to this or when politicians will catch up to it, to realize that they're actually the ones in the minority with everything. And then they force feed us these polls like, well, 70% of the people are in favor of mandates. And it's like, I don't think so. I don't believe that. I don't believe it for 1 second.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This kind of digs us deeper into this hole where we're all arguing, I mean, as a country, about freedom of speech on privately held platforms. Do conservatives walk away from Twitter and Facebook and go to some of these newer platforms? This is what Marjorie Taylor Greene did a couple of days ago when she was suspended permanently from Twitter. So what happens in the end? Are we going to have two separate Americas? Conservatives are on their platforms and progressives are on their platforms?
Yeah, what happens in the end is big tech sows the division they're trying to avoid, right? They're trying to deplatform people, to stop the spread of misinformation, or to keep, to stop people from being radicalized, or whatever reason they justify for deplatforming and censoring. And all they're doing is they're actually causing massive mistrust in government and big tech, because it's getting to a point where everybody now has known somebody they trust, somebody they read, somebody they listen to, who has now been censored in some way by big tech.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of it, this pandemic, because it's been so fast moving, I know it's been a long time, it's been 2 years, but it's actually moving really quickly. It's moving so fast, we don't have the time to forget what the media said that they now have to backpedal on, that they now have to say something opposite of.
Mm-hmm.
It's only been a couple of months and then Fauci has to flip, right?
Right.
So something that was like, now they're all over the news now saying cloth masks don't work against Omicron. I mean, they're on CNN. I mean, you got Dr. Lena Wen saying, you have all these experts that are all over CNN and MSNBC saying cloth masks don't work. And that was something you were literally banned. I mean, Rand Paul, I believe, was actually removed from YouTube. He had a video removed, or he was given a warning and unable to upload or whatever for saying that exact thing a few months ago.
And then he quit YouTube day before yesterday.
Yeah, that's Rand Paul's
went over
answer, 'cause he's a libertarian.
And went over to dating site Bumble, I believe. No, wait. He went to Rumble. Completely different thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Rumble and Bumble.
Rumble. Totally different things.
I did well with
totally different things.
YouTube. And Rumble's going to be bigger than YouTube if YouTube doesn't, YouTube doesn't care because YouTube's Google, but Rumble is going to be the new, is turning into the new YouTube. But I don't know about, these other platforms.
To go back to John's point, though, about, a stratified America, why would someone who's a Democrat go to Rumble? Seriously.
To argue. They like to argue. I mean, I think people will end up in the same place. They either end up back on these other platforms and the platforms change, or I think the left does go and follow the right over to like Getter and Rumble and Gab or wherever people are these days.
Well,
and it's because they like to argue.
That could be it. But I would posit that Democrats would go to Rumble because it's easier to make money there than it is on YouTube. Rumble passes more of the advertising revenue to the content creator than YouTube does.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of, so I'm sure that'll be part of it. But, platforms that don't have money, kind of like Twitter, why would the left leave Twitter for Getter, for example? And it's because I think they just would want to see what the right wingers are saying. They'd want to argue with them. I think they would miss it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because we don't have enough arguing. We need more of that. That's what we can.
Well, people certainly aren't going to be willing to give it up. That's for sure.
Well, now let's turn to the worst event in American history coming up in just a couple of days, January 6th. Now, I know I don't want you're an overly having American, Kim. I don't want you to get emotional about this because I know the non-binary people like you tend to. But I'm just saying. John was pointing out that CNN is in full freak-out historical. I'll put it like this. There's a whole category of science fiction.
Yeah.
The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick is an example of alternate history. Right, John? You've heard of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I read the books. I watched the series. Completely different history, running parallel.
And it seems like CNN's doing that in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This alternate history about 1/6, about what happened, it's making it into Pearl Harbor and Auschwitz and
9/11.
9/11, all wrapped into one.
Yeah.
And Chuck Schumer's using that, Kim. He's tying in 1/6 to the push for voting rights. What do you think of that, Kim Iverson?
Kind of ironic. I don't, I mean, I hardly ever talk about the January 6th stuff just because I think it's so ridiculous. What CNN has, they just needed ratings. They used that. They've been using that for the last year to try to turn it into it's the catastrophe that continues giving them ratings. And they're just radicalizing people. Name one person, just one who was actually charged with sedition after January 6th. I mean, for them to be, it's this big terrorist attack that happened on our country, and it was the day democracy, they tried to kill democracy and all. I mean, look, people were out there protesting. If there's anybody trying to kill democracy, look, I definitely don't condone the people that broke into the Capitol building and, whatever. But that to me was no different than one of the many protests that happened during the summer where, a perfectly fine protest and a perfect, expressing your angst about something. And then parts of it went violent. Parts of it turned into looting and destruction and burning businesses down and even beating people up. Mm-hmm. That, to me, they were the same thing. It was a protest that went too far. And maybe there were even some other nefarious forces at play that were instigating it. I don't know. But the interesting thing about it is that people have the right to protest, and they have the right to claim that an election wasn't what they thought it would be or should be. I mean, people have been doing that forever. That's not new. Everybody goes around saying, it was a sham. That's what the riots in Chicago at the Democratic Convention were actually about, was because Democrats rigged the election. They did. They rigged the primary, and it was Hubert Humphreys that got the nomination. He didn't even run, And Democrat voters were mad. They said, what is this? Why did we vote if you're going to put this guy in? And now the response to that is, okay, rather than dealing with democracy head on, rather than dealing with the fact that these people's votes didn't count, the Democratic Party gets to turn around and say, well, but we're a private corporation, so we don't actually have to count your votes. Right?
Now, John, I don't know if you, by the way, Kim, it's only a few more days to John's co-host here at the Backstory.
I heard that.
Yeah.
Are you getting a new co-host or what?
He's getting a new co-host. Austin Pelly will be joining us next week. And John's moving to Political Misfits, which is noon to 2 right here on Sputnik. But, John, I don't know if you heard this.
That show?
What's that?
Someone leaving that show? Because there's 2 hosts on that show, right?
Yeah. Right. Bob Schlehuber's leaving that show.
Yes.
He's left already.
Okay.
And the show's off
I'm
this
up to
week.
date. Okay.
There you go. Now, but John, to get you up to date, in London at Madame Tussauds, however you say it, Wax Museum, in the the part where they've got like, Henry VIII, Adolf Hitler, and that guy wearing a fur, no shirt, and Jamiroquai hat, the QAnon shaman. He's in that. I'll put it like this. Not one of the great villains of history.
For real.
QAnon
in the Rogues Gallery.
No. I made that.
I was going to say, good grief. Is that where we've gotten ourselves now?
If CNN had their way, if CNN is programming Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, that's how it would go. But, Kim, let's have one of your last questions from John Kiriakou.
Yeah. I'm interested, too, in the talk that we're hearing about Joe Biden not running for re-election. You know, we brought it up briefly on the show a week ago, but there's been a lot in places like the New York Times and MSNBC that, you know, after Biden said a couple of weeks ago that he has not made a decision yet whether he wants to run, he's going to assess his health. He would be 82 years old at the time of his next inauguration were he to run and win. What we haven't seen is people flocking to the notion of President Kamala Harris. And indeed, a new poll that was released in New Hampshire day before yesterday shows that Donald Trump would wallop Kamala Harris in New Hampshire. What do you think about Joe Biden not running for president again? Do you think that's a possibility? And if he doesn't run, is there a Democratic frontrunner?
No, I think he has to run. I don't think they have a choice because they really, you know, once again, Democrats didn't read the room. You know, they just thought they knew best, and they decided to impose on the voters and what they thought would be, you know, their will, which is Kamala Harris. Had they actually listened to the voters, they would have realized Kamala Harris was not popular at all. And I knew that their game plan all along was to replace the president, replace Joe Biden with whoever was vice president. And I'd been saying since she was even named that the plan was to move her into, you know, into the Oval Office within probably 3 years into his term, so that then she would have 1 year as sitting president with all the op-eds, with doing all of the, you know, looking like the president, and then she would be the incumbent that would run. And that would actually set her up to not only run in 2024, but it would actually set her up to do another term in addition. So she would actually end up, she could serve 10 years as president, possibly because of the laws, the way they work. And so, but they messed up because nobody likes Kamala. And, you know, but then again, I don't put anything past Democrats. They maybe would still try to go for that anyway. And they might think, okay, well, the last ditch effort is to actually, have Joe Biden resign because of his health and have Kamala take over. And maybe people will take to her once she's actually president of the United States. And then they'll play on the whole, well, you can't vote against her because she's a woman of color, you know, a woman and a woman of color at that. So then you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a bigot. It's extremism, it's terrorism, it's you know, it's science denying, it's insurrectionist, it's, you know, all of these other reasons why she, you know, if she loses, that's what it all is. So I wouldn't put it past them to still attempt that. What I really firmly believe was the original plan all along, until they realized, wow, people really don't like Kamala. Crap.
Right. I agree with you. I think that they misread the room, and people genuinely don't like Kamala Harris, including most Democrats.
Let me just, in the last minute or so here, let me just posit an alternate theory. They don't care. What I'm saying is, I don't think they care if people like Kamala Harris or not. Because once she's in power, if that's what happens. They don't seem to care that people, they're not playing this for a popularity contest. Kim, what say you?
Well, if you believe elections do count, then they would be afraid of Kamala Harris. That's what I would say about that.
Well, I'm iffy on that point. Again, not to sound cynical, but I'm cynical. I don't think the elections count that much. And I think, again, they haven't counted for a while, but fantastic appearance, as usual, by Kim Iverson. Kim, he's not leaving Sputnik. He's just going a few hours earlier.
Well, I expect the invite to the other show, too. So now I'm going to be making the rounds.
There you go. That's right. Mikasa su casa.
Yeah. As long as you don't blow us off, Kim, because we love having you on the show. Kim Iverson.
I've been on Political Misfits, too. So, you know, hey, I'm game.
Good. Yeah, good. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And fantastic show today. Thanks to our friend Mark Sloboda coming at us straight from Moscow. We'll be back tomorrow. Countdown 3 more shows with the great John Kiriakou here on Backstory.